They came back a minute later, asked me what was going on, how I was feeling, and I told them exactly what was going on with my vision, and they, Dr. Maroon, Dr. Bradley, Yates, Norwig, everybody was like, "You're done. Let's go in the locker room and evaluate you." And, it was kind of one of those things when I was standing there on the sideline, thinking, do I want to go back in this game? I started thinking about my family, about my lifestyle when I get done with football. Do I want to, with all these injuries, with the Frank Gifford and Junior Seau and the CTE that's going around, the brain is nothing to mess with. So I was literally on the sideline for probably the first time in maybe my life thinking about my family and not going back in a game because I didn't feel quite right.
Powerful words by Big Ben, who said he feels good 2 days after reporting concussion-like symptoms to the team in Seattle, but the Steelers aren't ready to start him just yet. Mike Tomlin saying Tuesday that Ben suffered what is now being described as a concussion and remains in the concussion protocol. However, Ben says he expects to go Sunday against the Colts. Let's make sense of this. Hall of Famer Jerome Bettis is here. Good to see you. As always, break this down for us. Are you surprised by Ben's comments?
I'm not surprised. You have to think, right now players are being bombarded with all of the CTE talk, with the conversations, with the movies. I mean, everything is really leaning towards guys understanding that there is a problem here with the concussions. And so this is ultimately what the NFL would like to see, players self-reporting this type of a situation. And, I don't think it's a one type situation where this is the only guy that's going to do this. I believe that ultimately you will start seeing this more and more. Does it make Ben any less of a football player? No, absolutely it doesn't. He wasn't feeling good. So as a quarterback, especially, you don't want the quarterback in there if all of his resources and if his mind is not 100% sharp, because that's a position you can't afford that. But any position on the football field right now, I would have to say, if there is a question mark, you have to take yourself out of the game, because you're going to cause further injury to yourself because you're not right.
Go ahead. I can't remember. Did you have any head issues?
I did. I had a couple concussions, but at that point, I mean,
I thought you caused.
No. The other guys, you don't want to see what they look like.
All right, that's what
I got a little dinged up. Okay, right. They had to carry those guys out. No,
got your nickname for a reason.
Exactly.
The bus.
But it was a situation where, all of this information was not available to me. Okay. So had this information been available to me, probably one of those I would have said to myself, okay, I need to take a second to get myself together. There was one time when I pulled myself out of the game. I got hit in the back of the head with a knee, and I needed to leave. That was the end of the game for me. But that was the first time. It was a preseason game, and so I knew I wasn't right. Preseason game, let me get out of the game.
Okay, got it. I was shocked by these comments from this quarterback. This is as tough a quarterback as I have ever watched.
Absolutely.
This is a quarterback back in his younger days, as you recall, and we're going way back, who chose to ride a motorcycle to, I think it was to practice or something, with no helmet and nearly killed himself. Remember that one?
Absolutely.
I'm not sure he's ever quite recovered fully from all that. And yet, when this man talked about his family, and he's now father, husband, we know that. Once he went to family, to me, in your sport, that is the beginning of the end for me, because now you have a whole different mindset and view of how much you're going to risk your body in general for this, because Ben has taken so many shots. He's been hurt so many times. He's now having to come to grips with his football mortality, where at some point you're going to say, can I play with my kids? You've been through this. You know this, right? Absolutely. Okay? Well, he's at risk right now. So when that guy said it, the toughest, as tough a quarterback as I've ever seen, no quarterback that I can remember takes more shots than Ben does, because he's so big and he can shrug off so many pass rushers. He just takes the abuse and goes right on. Okay? So I was pretty surprised by this. Now, what I love about the game right now, obviously for the players, the level of awareness has been heightened heightened greatly. But in the end, you still have to make a call, as you had to make starting in high school. Are you going to risk it or not? Because I don't care how aware you are, you're going to get hurt at some point. Now, at the end of the rainbow, the fame and fortune is you're a Hall of Famer. It's great what football did for you. But at some point, you still have to risk it. Nobody's going to force you to risk it. You're not an indentured servant, right? Nobody holds a gun to your head. At any moment, you can walk away and say, I am done with that. And I'm done with my fame and fortune to a degree, right?
Right.
Okay? But all this new awareness is going to deeply affect a lot of players, and it's going to make it harder on them to continue to play the violent, great game that is football.
Well, let me tell you what I see. What I see is now the distinction being made between I can play hurt and this is not something to play with. So you got to think about it. Ben just came off of a foot where no one thought he could play, and coach said, I'm going to leave the door ajar. Yeah. Well, guess what? He played the next week.
He did.
So it tells me that he's willing to play hurt, okay? But this is not something that he's willing to play with. So I think there's a clear distinction here of his willingness to put his body on the line from a injury standpoint, saying, you know what, I can hobble, I can still make the plays, but with the head injury, I'm not going to play with it.
Right.
And so I think there's been a really a line that's been put in the sand, and I applaud him for it.
Okay.
Let me tell you what makes me uncomfortable about this conversation. Skip, I get where you're coming from the perspective that it really resonated with you what Big Ben Roethlisberger said, and I totally agree with you. I know how much appreciation you have for his toughness, and I know what level of appreciation both of you have for the game of football. When I heard Ben Roethlisberger say what he said, knowing his history of playing through one injury after another, there were a couple of thoughts going through my mind. One was a raised eyebrow aimed in the direction of the NFL, where I said to myself, this new movie, Concussion, by Will Smith, the great Will Smith, that was filmed in Pittsburgh, okay? You know, that's coming out in a couple of weeks. Yeah. All right, it's not just speaking to the problem. It's speaking to the level of knowledge that the NFL had. And we'll find out. You know, I'm not saying we'll know. It's not like they won't have plausible deniability. But clearly it will indicate and imply that there was more that was known. There was more they could have let on. You could have warned these players. You could have positioned them to safeguard themselves. Okay? So in that respect, it had me thinking about that. The other side is, Skip, it had me thinking about other players in a way that I would dare say through no fault of your own. You're just talking football, but I think that my level of sensitivity is heightened than yours, from the perspective that you're quick to say, you got to know what you're signing on for. You're right about that. But damn, Big Ben made over $50 million. Big Ben's getting paid. Okay. Big Ben can walk away from the game of football right now and be set for the rest of his life.
Well, should he? Is that where you're going?
No.
Okay.
Where I'm going is most other players ain't.
Oh.
And so as a result, when you're talking about Big Ben Roethlisberger and you're talking about his toughness and you're like, wow, this really hit home, because even he seemed concerned and he was able to step back and think about his family and say, is it really worth it for me to go back into that game? That's an easy call for him to make, because all you're thinking about is, look, is the game worth my health? That's all you got to think about. Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, you know, list goes on and on, to a lesser degree, Adrian Peterson, a few others. That's all they got to think about. Most of the league, what they got to think about is, damn, I need this check.
Okay.
Am I going to be able to get this somewhere else? And it's just, you're right. Please don't get me wrong. You're right. And I'm in no way implying that you don't care about that. No, I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying y'all are thinking about Ben, and I couldn't help but think about the non-Ben Roethlisbergers, the dudes who ain't getting paid.
Quick point. How many of those who ain't getting paid in the Steelers locker room after that game at Seattle were a little leery of why their quarterback pulled himself out of a game that probably couldn't have been won, but might have been won. I mean, it's still not over
your question, because when you ask that question about them being a little leery, what are you saying? A little leery of Ben or a little leery of the concussion issue?
Ben.
Oh.
Their quarterback said, I don't even want to risk this.
What
think they resented that at all?
Possibly not. But here's the deal. Ben Roethlisberger doesn't have to care, because clearly, no matter what kind of priority they are, they don't usurp the priority that is that of his wife and children. Yep. And so what I'm saying is this. Hold on for 1 second. Right. I'm just saying this. Skip, when we bring that up, because of how serious these concussion issues are and the factual evidence that speaks to how debilitating the CTE is, I'm saying to you, they're looking at him and saying, oh, if you're right, they're saying you making all of this money, why can't you go back in there? While others are sitting there saying, well, we perfectly understand why he didn't need to go back in there. It's a regular season game, in the Super Bowl on the line, and on top of it all, you get paid, live another day. Those guys don't get to make that distinction. They can't sit there and say regular season, playoffs, meaningless game, meaningful game. Every game is meaningful to them because they ain't getting paid what Big Ben Roethlisberger's and that ilk is getting paid. It's check to check for a lot. And this is where the NFL, nobody speaks to that. More so than in the NBA and Major League Baseball. In the National Football League, it's the most violent sport, most vicious, and oh, by the way, it's the most precarious, because those guys got guaranteed deals. And a guy can get hurt in the NBA right now. You got 4 or 5 years to go on your deal. You got it. It's locked. Done. NFL, you here today, you going tomorrow. So it's like, I couldn't help but think about those non-Ben Roethlisbergers is all I'm trying to say.
And as a player in the locker room and as a former teammate, I would not be upset that he pulled himself out once we found out he did have a concussion. It was now, if he pulled himself out as a precaution, now that's when I would be a little upset as a teammate. Okay, but he had a concussion, no problem, done. That's not even an issue. I would not be upset about it in one bit. Now, the point that you make up, I think is a very good point, in the sense that there won't be those guys self-reporting themselves. Because you got to pull those guys off the field. And that's why they have the spotters now, for that very reason, for those guys who are not going to take themselves out of the game because they can't afford to.
But the spotter didn't catch this.
Well,
and the officials didn't stop play. Does that frustrate you?
No, absolutely. It doesn't, because if it
just happened with Case Keenum, though.
No, but if this that was a bit egregious. I mean, since that he was a little sloppy on the field. That it didn't take a rocket scientist to see that. You could see that. Now, Ben's, it was just a hit to the head. Now, here's what you got to understand. If the spotter now pulls him out of the game, if I'm a defender and I'm playing in the playoff game, I'm going to go at the quarterback's head just to get him out of the game. Okay? I'll take the 15-yard penalty, but if the spotter is now going to pull him out for every hit to the head, you have to be very careful with that. So I don't have a problem with the spotter not seeing that. The good part is that he's self-reported. I think ultimately that's where the NFL wants everyone to get to.
They'll never get that.
And they'll never get that. They'll never get that because
only with the guys that are getting paid.
Absolutely.
Only with the guys that are getting paid.
Absolutely.
And not only that, y'all got to also remember that those players who might have a question, most of them, I would dare say, won't, because Big Ben is the one guy whose toughness and willingness to play you never question.
You can't question.
They would never. I mean, you know, Tom Brady would be another to speak to your level, his level of toughness. Who's going to question what that Tom Brady wants to come out of a game? It's just not going to happen. You know better. You know if there's a way that guys like even Drew Brees, you know if there's a way for guys like that to play, they will play.
You just saw Ben play with the bad foot.
Like, you know that's how it goes. It's the other guys that are some other guys that are questionable. You know, and I don't mention any names because I don't know definitively, but there are other guys that are questionable. It ain't Big Ben.
No,
anybody in that locker room that will play, you better have some significant cachet if you want to question Big Ben Roethlisberger in the Steelers locker room.
It just seems
nobody in that locker room can question
nobody,
because he's the leader.
this is a new approach because he said, for the first time, I thought of my family.
Yeah, but he said
that's
for
new.
He said for the first time because he said, quote, I never felt that way before, injury-wise.
Yeah, right.
He said, he said this was foreign. So that's entirely different. Like you feeling something, all of a sudden you on the ground and, yeah, man, stuff's spinning right now. I ain't never felt like this before.
Okay, but I'm
What's wrong with
both
this? Because you can deal with pain.
Pain.
See, Ben has a high pain tolerance.
doubt.
So his threshold for pain, I mean, one of the best, right?
Right.
But this wasn't pain.
Yeah.
This was that awkward uncomfortableness that he's never felt before.
Well, he did say he had a migraine.
And that's what he had.
You know, like he called it migraine pain, okay?
Okay.
I want to remind both of you, bigger picture. I've read survey after survey of NFL players over the last 2 years, a majority of which show that most players want to play with a concussion for all the reasons you've talked about. For money, for the fame, the fortune, they're in. They've committed. They know it's there. They know it's part of the game. They are willing to live with that part of the game. And if that's their choice, I'm fine with that. I don't want them, you know, they're not forced to play.
I know we got to move
choosing.
on. I know we got to move on, but I got to ask you this. When you say you're fine, I need you to clarify what that means, because to me, just sitting on the outside,
they're not going to self-report.
But it's almost like you're saying, and I don't believe you mean this. That's why I'm asking the question. It almost sounds like you're saying, look, concussions come with the game. If you're out on the field and you feel a little woozy, deal with it.
Okay, but they've already made that choice. They're saying it with a clear head. If I do feel a little woozy, I'm not going to self-report because I need my football.
But I'm saying to you, do you have a problem with the league pulling them off the field?
No, I do not.
Okay, that's why I want to make sure.
To protect itself from lawsuits going forward.
That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say they got to get off the field.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Speaking of the league trying to protect themselves, including the preseason, there's been 131 concussions reported in the NFL this season. But good news for our Steelers fan and our former Steeler. Jeremy Fowler just reporting that Ben Roethlisberger said he's cleared to practice today, took an impact concussion test again this morning. He doesn't know the results, but he's allowed to see the field for Wednesday's session, so good sign.
I would love
Sunday
to see what
against
those
the Colts.
concussion tests include. What do they do? Knock you upside your head again to see if you take it?
Why did you do a feature?
I would love to know.
It's a battery of questions that they ask you. So now what they do is they set a standard initially with the questions when you take this test when you're fine. Okay, then
they have a baseline how you register.
Then they have a battery of tests
Thank you for that.
that goes afterwards after you've been concussed to see if everything matches up.
Thank you for that.
Appreciate that insight.
No problem.
Jerome, thanks for being with us. After the break, so you're saying there's a chance the Cowboys aren't ruling out Tony Romo for the rest of the season.
This is going to be a good.
It's going to be great, Skip. What's going on?
I'm excited about it. I'm excited.
He did this to get on my nerves. He did this to get on my nerves. That's what